What does it take to build a new transit station? In Oakland's San Antonio neighborhood, a group of residents has spent years trying to answer that question. In this conversation, we sit down with Ben and Sarah from the San Antonio Station Alliance to explore who they are, why they're advocating for a new BART station, how the process works, and what other communities can learn from their journey. Let's start with the people behind the movement.
Hi, Sam.
Good morning.
Welcome to Farley's.
Uptown Oakland.
In Uptown Oakland. And today we are joined by the San Antonio Station Alliance. We've got Ben and we've got Sarah.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Sam and I are so excited to have you on our podcast. And we want to start this chat off the same way we start every single one. Do you all consider yourselves city people? Sarah,
And
do you
why?
And why? Sarah, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, well, definitely I'm a city person. First of all, I grew up in the 80s and I love like all those 80s movies that took place, you know, like erotic thrillers that took place in New York City. Like that was my favorite thing. But like, what comes to mind when you say that is think about during the pandemic. Yeah. A big group of our local neighborhood kids, my daughter included, would run around, play out in the streets. Like we all live steps from each other. Mm-hmm. They had this really magical experience growing up because we had a slow street. Right.
Okay.
11th Avenue was a slow street, blocked off street, and that was an example of how like good urban design could create like a really, really positive experience. Like,
you guys were free-range kids.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we kept saying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We'd just throw snacks at them. Like,
oh my God, just don't feed the seagulls.
Before dark, maybe.
Well, and as parents, you're climbing the walls trying to figure out what to do, with your kids all day, and and if they can use the outdoor space, the urban space, it was so useful for all of our mental health.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Ben, what about you?
I mean, certainly I consider myself a city person. I would love to be able to walk to everything that I need and want in a city, grocery store, bar, restaurant, that sort of thing. I think like cities are defined by their walkability, and that's something that is near and dear to me. But I'm always thinking conversely about how cities help shape the environments outside of cities, and kind of like how we, if we don't build density within our cities and create walkable urban spaces, then the inverse of that is sprawling out and taking over kind of our wilderness and our protected spaces. Sure. And I'm always thinking about how these places that I go to, that I enjoy to go hiking and backpacking, and if we weren't building cities and living in dense urban environments, they would just be another kind of suburban sprawl location. Right. So I'm thinking about both sides of the coin whenever I'm thinking about urbanism, and so those are kind of things that come to mind as a city person.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk all about transportation and what that means for communities today. Yeah. But even before that, I kind of want to know a little bit about you guys. Like, what makes you tick? What sort of brought you to this point, whether it be career, family, growing up, that kind of shapes what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
You go first.
Sure. Well, I'm a transportation planner by trade.
Surprise, surprise.
I went to...
We have so many of those, don't we?
Certainly in our circles. I went to urban planning school, actually in LA, and it was something that I thought about a lot, just like as we think about cities and their built environment and how to get around. Where we are in those locations, like we also have to think about how to get around them, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of talk about housing these days, but I feel like less so about transportation, and that's something that's I'm always thinking about is like, okay, we're building these dense urban cores, but how do we get around those places? So for me, it kind of came from, I was living in San Francisco, I was taking the bus 4 miles to work to my job, and the bus would take me over an hour to get there.
Wow.
And I was like, we're in a dense urban environment.
You can walk that practically.
Totally. Yeah. And then I got a bike and it took me 15 minutes. Yeah. And I was like, we're in one of the most dense, progressive cities in the United States, and the transit system is
like, what's wrong here?
Deeply flawed.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into kind of transportation planning at the beginning. Yeah. And then with San Antonio Station, I was in the neighborhood with a bunch of neighbors that were really interested in having an impact in the neighborhood. Sarah will tell the story better than I, but there was a Link 21 meeting, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to think about where a second Transbay tube might go and what stations would connect San Francisco to the East Bay with a second Transbay tube. And there was a dot on the map in San Antonio. And so there was kind of this aha moment in the community.
Ben, that's a phenomenal background, and it's actually been really exciting to work with you in both of our fields in transportation planning. Sarah, I'd love for you to kind of share with us your background, not just professionally, but your personal, as much as you care to share.
I moved out here from the Midwest, landed here in 2007. Fell in love with Oakland, as many people do, of course, and lived in this sort of small community in the San Antonio neighborhood of Oakland, and just a kind of a housewife, basically. Like I have a few jobs here and there or whatever, but like I definitely got on the mommy track for a little bit. And
love it.
But
the hardest job on the planet,
yes,
for the record.
So I was like a career transitioner, right? So one of my first jobs was working at a semiconductor manufacturing place way down in Fremont. Right?
Casual.
Oh my gosh, it was insane.
Way down in Fremont.
The traffic down there, it was like an hour at least, one way in the car. And I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on gas, on
maintenance and tires.
Yeah, and
it's just not worth it at that point.
It was like I need a better
situation.
Option, for this. Cars are very, very expensive for a family.
Yes.
I think the median income in our community is like $70,000.
Yeah,
or something. Which if you have a car, like your car is taking up about $17,000 or something. It's a lot.
I mean, transportation is the second largest expense outside of housing, right now in the Bay Area.
A few statistics for our listeners. My understanding, just going off of what you just shared, Sarah, is that if the median income for the San Antonio neighborhood, which we'll situate in a second, is about $70,000.
I think it's median household income.
Median household income.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
The median household income for Alameda County, where Oakland is situated, is about $110,000. So let's use that number. I want to do a couple of things here just to level set us. Can you, one of you, share with us where San Antonio neighborhood is in the broader context of Oakland?
And we'll show a map eventually.
Sure. Well, we kind of think of it as between two BART stations, right? So Lake Merritt BART, which is right south of Lake Merritt, and then Fruitvale, which is 3 miles east of Lake Merritt.
Okay.
And so there's this kind of neighborhood in between that are known as both San Antonio and Clinton.
Okay.
And it's kind of a dense urban neighborhood that was the first neighborhood, I believe, west of the Mississippi to go under through urban renewal. So federally funded urban renewal project in the 50s.
Wow.
Can you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood? If I'm walking around, and you and I have gotten coffee there before, tell us a little bit about what's there.
Well, it's a lot of single family homes, but mixed. I've heard it referred to as a checkerboard, right? So there's some, big beautiful mansions. There are some cinder block apartment buildings. There are a lot of small homes that, as Ben was saying, were built around the turn of the century. There's Little Saigon, which is the Vietnamese community that's been there for about 50 years now, and is going. They're kind of the backbone of the community, honestly. And there are a lot of retail establishments, like faux houses and car repair shops that are.
Sounds like my kind of place.
It's nice. But like there's San Antonio Park. But like as far as like when I tell people where we live, I can't think of a good landmark. There's 14th Avenue. There's a Burger King down there. And we kind of, Ben says this a lot, we need a there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the Bay Area for most of my life, and San Antonio has recently come up as a neighborhood, at least in our vernacular, I guess. but it's clearly always been there, and this is 3-mile stretch. Okay, so we're situated in this neighborhood now. We sort of like can understand what it looks and feels like.
The San Antonio Station Alliance isn't just advocating for a new station because they love transit. They're making a case that one of Oakland's densest neighborhoods has been overlooked for decades, and that investing here could improve access, opportunity, and mobility for thousands of residents. So, does the case hold up?
Let's talk about SASA. Let's talk about this organization that you all are heading up, the San Antonio Station Alliance.
Yes, you got it.
I got it, but we'll call it SASA for short. What is it?
Yeah, so we are a group of neighbors, impassioned neighbors that kind of came together around 2023, 2022, 2023, kind of in response to a community meeting about a project called Link 21. And Link 21 is not about the 21st century. It's about the 21 county Northern California mega region that the state is trying to connect via rail. And so the state is thinking about this kind of interconnectivity of rail between these 21 counties, but really the flagship project within that project is a second Transbay tube that would go underneath the bay and connect Oakland to San Francisco to create redundancy through the rail system, but also to connect new neighborhoods. So this project was...
As opposed to the one connector that goes right under the transit.
Right. So currently we're going from downtown San Francisco at the Embarcadero to West Oakland. And so there's a bunch of different iterations, but the idea is that there would be another station kind of maybe in the Mission Bay area of San Francisco. It would come through to West Alameda, Jack London Square, and then big question mark.
That's more my route, honestly.
Well, I want to add just a bit of context to Link 21 as well, and I think it will help shed some light on this conversation. So my understanding for Link 21 was always, it came about during a time when BART, mainly the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, was at a crunch load. You know, before the pandemic, so this is 2019, when people were just shoulder to shoulder in each other's faces on the train getting to and from Oakland to San Francisco and beyond. And that for the folks who've ridden BART, at times it might shut down or there might be problems. And the moment there's a problem in the Transbay Tunnel underneath the San Francisco Bay, the whole system stops because it's a bottleneck for the rest of the system crossing from one side of the bay to the other. What's interesting about this conversation, though, is that, and I'm glad that Link 21 had brought this up, is that adding more BART stations, not just more lines, is also part of the discussion about how we get more people riding transit. I would go a step farther, Ben, and say that you are a shadow planning organization for the city or for BART or for the county as well.
Well, doing the hard work behind the scenes to show what the impact could be. Because I think it sounds like you needed to do that in order to make a case like it's not happening from either the like sort of municipal level and that you needed to come together to sort of advocate in this way.
It really sparks people's interest and attention. Like once you dive into the statistics of our area, just even a little bit, people will be like, well, wait a minute, I didn't realize we had that kind of density here. Well, wait a minute, I didn't realize there were 3 miles in between Lake Merritt and Fruitvale. And
it's the widest gap, right?
In the urban network of BART stations. So in Berkeley, San Francisco, and Oakland, the average station spacing between BART stations is 1.1 miles.
Wow. So this is triple.
This is almost triple. It's 2.8 miles between Lake Merritt and Fruitvale.
Why, and we'll dive into the history, I guess, is why isn't there a station in between here? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, and there's not a whole lot of documentation about the history of like the planning of BART as it pertains to East Oakland. But the simplest way to understand it is that BART was developed as a rail network that was kind of ushering folks from the white suburbs in the Bay Area to the downtown cores of Oakland and San Francisco. And to do that, they wanted to do it efficiently. So in a lot of situations, a lot of places, they just passed over dense urban communities so that people could get a faster ride and they wouldn't have to pay as much for the system. So East Oakland, as a whole, has 2 stations, and it's about 8 miles long through the BART tracks.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Interesting.
But
So,
if I may, just a little bit more history about BART once it was built, right? Is that, and for folks who live in the Bay Area, you know this, but for folks outside, BART is an agency which has a board of directors that are elected, have had a habit of expanding the system farther and farther out into almost into the valley, up north, down south, but we've never had a conversation until very recently, until Link 21, about what it might look like to capture more riders, not because we've gone farther outside of the bay, but because we've added a station or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in between stations that are represented by dense neighborhoods.
Yeah, for all the transit nerds out there, if you want to look at a density map of our neighborhood, San Antonio, versus the stations that BART has expanded out to, our neighborhood is, I believe, 16,000 people per square mile.
Wow.
Versus some of the new stations that have been built in the last 10, 20 years are 2,000, 4,000 people per square mile.
Goodness.
And that's building the lines in the entire right-of-way out, whereas infill stations are just building a station on top of the existing rail network.
Okay.
Can you, and I think everybody in this group can sort of paint a picture for our audience, like there is a huge difference between building new rail and an infill station.
Yeah.
An infill station feels easier, simpler, there's already track, like it's already going through that neighborhood. Like, can you give us a sense of like how difficult of a lift would this be? Let's just say your advocacy goes well. What would that look like,
Yeah, well, from a funding perspective,
Yeah. But also compare it, right, to New Rail or BRT or some other
Get
option.
some numbers for us.
it's all over the map, right?
Yeah.
We're dealing with tariffs and inflation and all of that. But as we understand it, an infill station would cost around $500 million, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Million dollars. $500 million. Okay.
And I want to just provide for listeners who are not transportation planners, because it's kind of fun to play with these numbers for a second. When you expand a typical rail system like BART, the rule of thumb is that it's about $1 million a foot underground. Above ground, it might be about $500,000 a foot. So that's just 1 foot of track over and over and over again. That's expanding the rail. The second is freeways. Expanding a freeway is hundreds of millions of dollars. So for listeners, when you hear $500 million to add a new station, I just want you to have a comparison point for other types of transportation improvements that you might have seen or experienced in your community.
Yeah. And we could do a per foot analysis and put that up.
Yeah.
But it sounds expensive, it sounds hard, but what I'm just hearing at face value is that this is much easier than building either a new freeway, new street, or new rail, right? It's more possible, even though it sounds really, really big.
And just in terms of ease, both the Amtrak, the standard gauge rail and the BART rail are at grades, kissing right next to each other.
In our neighborhood.
In our neighborhood, right at the spot where the station could be. So, I mean, there would not have to be a ton of
And are we talking about adding a building to a station? Is that required? What does that also look like?
There's we're at the very nascent stages of this.
If we're just dreaming a little,
But dream.
But
dream,
so our vision, because this station would be the closest physical station location to the bay.
Okay.
So basically, you could spit into the water of the bay.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just hundreds of feet away. So creating kind of a land bridge and connection to the bay from the station, which is currently kind of divided by the freeway and the train tracks, is part of our vision. So it would be also connecting to this brand new development in Oakland that's currently very disconnected from the rest of the city called
This is
Brooklyn
Brooklyn
Base.
Basin,
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. And has 3,700 apartments.
Wow.
So that would be maybe potentially double that amount of people proposed for the area, which is not fully complete yet,
Yeah.
but there are people living there right now. And there's really only a couple ways in and out, and it's through driving mostly.
And I just, for folks who didn't catch those numbers, Ben mentioned that in some cases, stations at the end of the BART line might have 2,000 people in a square mile.
Yeah.
And you just described one development across the freeway from the station you all want to infill that has almost 4,000 people.
That's right. And that's almost 4,000 apartments.
Right. So it might be almost 8,000 people by the time you're done.
Yeah. I just interviewed a resident of Brooklyn Basin, and she mentioned frequently, like, just how difficult it was for her to go and get groceries.
Yeah.
Or sometimes she'd be like stuck trying to get back home, but there would be a freight train in the way.
Interesting.
Wow.
Just recently,
It's just isolated, basically. Yeah.
Just recently, they extended a bus line through Brooklyn Basin, but before that, they had a shuttle that ran like once at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that was it.
So
ahead.
this is, I think we've made a pretty clear case for why there should be a BART station here. Just to recap, great density. It's a good spot in between a long gap of two also popular stations. I think, Sarah, you've also mentioned that in terms of the, let's call it engineering of physically putting the thing there, the box, the turnstiles, etc., this area is nice and flat.
Yep.
BART's not pitching in any way.
Right.
But I want to shift us to how.
Having a good idea is one thing. Turning that idea into a funded, approved, and eventually built transit project is something else entirely. Let's dig into the agencies, funding sources, politics, and planning process that stand between a community vision and reality.
Where might that money come from?
Yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities for that money.
Yeah.
There's, a lot of grants out there for these types of things, but really, like, we think that there's an opportunity, like a tax financing district for this project that might make the most sense as a model.
Okay.
Where basically property owners around the district agree to tax themselves on their future income
Okay.
for development, and then that money can be used to pay for building the station now. And so therefore the rising tide kind of lifts all boats.
Just to repeat back, it sounds like what the basic assumption is station built. When you build a station, the value of properties around that station go up, and that by extension, as property values go up, property tax revenue goes up. And you're suggesting, as a tax increment financing district, that increment, that cream on the top, we commit that for a period of time to repay the cost of building the station.
That's a way better way of saying it. Thank you.
And I think that makes sense. And it's funny that you should mention that because, and we'll have to invite Victor Flores on. He's on the BART board of directors, because this is his, as I understand it, his whole thrust for how to pivot BART towards an even more sustainable financial model. BART brings value to the neighborhoods it's in, and BART should derive value back from the neighborhoods it is bringing those dollars and those people into.
Yeah, and I think just importantly, the only transit agencies in the world that turn a profit are those that use their real estate around the station to turn that profit. You don't make money by running the train or the bus.
Wow.
You make money by the real estate.
By the real estate.
That
It's a very
money that
old
comes
model,
in.
right? That the train companies of yore owned the land around their stations, not just the tracks, not
Totally.
just the station houses. A little bit of context for our listeners as well, and we'll be chatting with this group at some point too. BART has a strategy to develop the properties around its station. And so for future discussion, it's going to be interesting to see how they marry that concept, this transit-oriented development concept, with an infill station. So it's, shall we build a station, and how might we build around that station to support the station and the community with it?
And there are a lot of great models to follow there.
I would love if we could plug in a little bit more about like future state sort of like how it would impact the community positively? Because we talked about like, oh, you have access to a station, but like we need to bring that to life a little bit more. Like what could it mean for the people who live in that neighborhood? What could they do differently? How would their lives be changed? Because you talk about safety in business, and that was really like interesting. And I feel like some people who are not transportation people, who are city people, are like, why should I care? You know what I mean?
Do that. Well, I mean, in our community, we have a lot of multi-generational families who share one car, right? You know, and so if grandma wants to go to H Mart one day, you know, like how is she going to get there? You know, the younger daughter has to drive her over there, right? You know, whereas like a station could just make that so much more simple. Gosh, what else? I mean,
you've talked to so many community members. Like, has there been like, I would take that to do X, Y, Z. You know?
Yeah, lots to talk about, like making the station almost like a plaza sort of thing. So like live music on Fridays. You know, to have like food trucks, to have to have it be like a true communal space.
Repeating that back, Sarah, what I'm hearing you say is that it's not just about the mobility that is derived from having a station there, which certainly alone is phenomenal, but that having a community anchor, a center of gravity for activity is really critical.
Yeah, I think that community gathering space is really important. You know, we have a couple of restaurants, a couple of coffee shops in the neighborhood right now that people kind of congregate to, but there's really no central place that people gather. And so I think that having a station would also, as Sarah mentioned previously, bring more eyes to the street, bring more park space for children to play, bring more housing for people to live, bring more small businesses for people to shop and dine at. So we really are looking at this and bring that connection to the waterfront so that people can easily get to the waterfront, get along the Bay Trail, get into nature a little bit. So we're really thinking about this as a catalyst for kind of community betterment, not just a mobility option for the existing community. It would also be a gathering space for that community as well.
I heard a really interesting term once. We often, as transportation planners, talk about transit-oriented development. But if you flip that, it's development-oriented transit. And that this is a bit of, I think, what you're getting at, that if you intentionally place transit as a catalyst for community improvement, that it works both ways.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's this conversation around building density around existing transit stations and stops that was just passed in the state legislature. So they've upzoned all these new bus and rail stations around the existing stations. But what do we do about future stations and how does that fit into the puzzle? And that's a question I think we want to answer as a local organization and try and build a model that the state can look at and start replicating in other places.
How have you all gone about advocating for the station to be here? We've worked a little bit on this, but if you can share for our listeners the process up until now of getting others to agree with you that this is a good idea.
Yeah, well, I think when we first started out, we had a lot of energy and we're like, this is a great idea, right?
Easy peasy.
But I think as time went on, we started listening a little more to like the pain points of business owners. For example, they worry about safety, street safety a lot. Right? Well, how would a station change that?
Support that.
Address those points, right? Like, if there's a BART station in the neighborhood, there are more people walking by. There are more lights. There are more, like security officers, whatever. And so things like that really help.
There's more activity also in general, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of like helps people click into what the station can do, as I mentioned.
So what Sarah's touching on is kind of the community organizing aspect of the work, and Sarah's been phenomenal at that. And there's just so many angles.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
It's so important. What is
Totally.
this all if we're not doing that, you know?
Yeah.
Like truly like just door to door organizing, and with others as well, but
Yeah.
Sarah's really been kind of on the front lines of that work. And so that's kind of been part of our coalition building, which is part of the how.
Okay.
The other part of the how is like which kind of buttons we have to press in government to make this project happen. And at the beginning of this effort, it was really kind of a throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks kind of up project. But we were then started to get strategic and learned from talking to various people how to, what plan it needs to get into this next plan to become a priority. And the Bay Area is notoriously factional in terms of its governmental structure. And so we have various plans of local, city, regional, countywide agencies that are kind of piling on top of each other's.
Ben, if you could do me a favor, and for listeners too, if you'll indulge me, can you describe all of the different, succinctly, government agencies that have a say in some way or another in whether or not a BART station gets placed in San Antonio?
Sure, yeah, I'll do
Just
my
the
best.
reality check.
And these are just public agencies, right?
Yeah.
There's also private property owners that we have to consider as well.
Sure.
But City of Oakland, Alameda County Transportation Commission, Caltrans, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, BART. There's Union Pacific, which is private, but also has property ownership.
Right.
And then there's some federal agencies that we'll probably have to go through at some
FTA,
point. The FTA, the state, the Transportation Board, Surface Transportation Board.
CCJAPA, Joint Powers.
Joint Powers Authority.
The Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority.
Okay, we're running out of fingers.
And I'm sure there's more that we haven't considered yet.
So that's at least nine agencies. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
It's a lot. But Ben, working in transportation, knows a lot of people. Sometimes it's reaching out to people that we know and then connecting through them. We started out with through our advisors. We started out with the Oakland General Plan. Okay. And which is once every 25 years, Oakland will update its general plan. And that's sort of we'll break the seal on some of those.
Got it. So basically, it's the goal is get in a plan somewhere. Have this be known as a thing, and then we will get through the many different agencies because it is set in this one plan, and maybe we can replicate it. Is that the goal?
Something like that.
There's complicated.
There's kind of the county thinks about their priorities based on the general plans of the city.
Okay.
So before we can even be considered by the county, we have to get in the Oakland general plan.
Got it.
Because if Oakland doesn't kind of note it as a priority, then the county's not even going to look at it.
Got
So
it.
there's kind of layers. And then the region, the MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, does the same thing, but on a regional level. So they're not thinking about anything unless the county has identified it as a priority.
So the city is a linchpin here.
That's what we understand.
It sounds like, Ben, it's like when you invite someone to a party and they ask, well, who else going to be there? Is my friend going to be there? Are those cuties going to be there? And that you have a series of nearly a dozen agencies all saying, well, I'll go if they go.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, I'm guessing
We're trying to get everybody to the party.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also, presumably having worked for the city of Oakland, the city's saying, well, we're going to say it's a priority if the neighbors think it's a priority.
And this is why the community organizing is such an important part of it.
New transit can bring opportunity. It can also bring change. In this final chapter, we explore how communities can fight for investment while protecting the culture, identity, and people that make a neighborhood worth investing in to begin with.
If a tree falls in the forest but nobody hears it, did it ever
No one
happen?
documents the tree, no one plans for the tree.
Right.
No trees are going to the meeting. This is
Exactly.
happening.
I mean, it does feel good to walk into these meetings saying we have a petition with 1,500 signatures on it. You know, like we have like a social media following and supporters who are, you know, who have a lot of weight behind that.
Amazing.
Sorry.
So I think a good example of bringing everybody to the party, as you say, was our walking tour that we did this September for Transit Month.
Oh, cool.
And we invited everybody and their mother that we possibly could. We got everybody from the neighborhood. We got folks from BART, from MTC. We had our BART director, Victor Flores, do a little talk. We had people from...
Shout out to Victor.
Hey,
Yeah,
Victor.
he's great.
Yeah. We had people from the San Antonio Neighborhood Association talk about how we wanted a library, you know, like, and so many people at that meeting, they were exchanging numbers, they were putting names to faces, and you know, I think there's a soft power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one other piece that I wanted to mention was just that we're not trying to be rabble-rousers here, right? We're not trying to change a system that's kind of chugging along and doing things that it's supposed to be doing.
Okay.
There's kind of a lack of long-range planning in Oakland and really the East Bay in general. And so we saw an opportunity and a lack of money, frankly, for these types of projects.
Sure.
So we saw an opportunity to really promote a great project that would be beneficial to both our community and the Bay Area at large.
Yeah.
And so I think we're just kind of cheerleaders for a great project where the kind of region and the city aren't thinking about those kind of long-range plans, transportation-wise, for our city and for our region. So that's where we kind of see ourselves as more cheerleaders than rabble-rousers.
We love a cheerleader. And Ben and Sarah, it sounds like you all have done a lot of work. And having worked with you a bit on this project, I can say personally, I know how hard you guys have really been pushing for this. I want us to pivot for a second and think a bit critically about I don't want to say negative impacts of placing a BART station in a neighborhood, but understanding how there are consequences to placing a multi-million-dollar capital improvement in a neighborhood that is predominantly low income, predominantly people of color. How do your neighbors think about balancing the positive aspects with the other challenges that might come with the BART station?
I mean, it's no doubt challenging, and these types of projects are always kind of there's a balance that has to be struck. You know, it's really difficult in the United States, especially where we have such an wealth gap, right? So your gentrification is kind of this concept that happens more in the United States because it's a lot of poor communities that are being replaced by wealthier communities. There's, you know, the YIMBY movement is kind of considering this and thinking about how more housing just as a base level kind of improvement is the way to give people more opportunity to rent or buy a home in the neighborhood. And so we think that any sort of station would have to come with a station area plan that is thoughtful about inclusivity, about new housing, about maintaining the culture of the neighborhood, acknowledging that Little Saigon is our anchor, as Sarah mentioned, also making the connection to the waterfront and building parks and small business corridors and other types of things so that people can have a livable, walkable community. But it's going to have to come with a thoughtful station area plan, and we're not there yet. We're advocating for the station as this kind of concept, and we want to be involved as a community throughout the entire planning process so that we can ensure that the community's voice is being heard and that people are not being displaced. But at the end of the day, housing is really the city has already acknowledged that we need more housing, right? Housing is a part of everything that every council member that talks about, you know, Oakland is talking about more housing. But we also have to be thinking about how people get from housing to housing, right? And
housing to parks and housing to jobs.
Exactly.
And jobs to jobs.
And you know, what makes a walkable community? Because if we build, you know, up everywhere in Oakland and we don't think about transportation, we don't think about parks, we don't think about small businesses, then everyone's just going to be stuck in traffic all the time, going to the parks and the small businesses and everything else outside of the city. So we're talking about this project to make sure that transportation and all the other things that I just mentioned are part of the equation. And again, I think like the station area plan is going to be thinking about the gentrification displacement issue, and we want a front seat at that table.
That is That sounds incredibly thoughtful, Ben, and I'm overjoyed to hear that you guys have already kind of started thinking about this and kind of understand too what is within your power to advocate for and consider, and where your job ends in a way. I want us to zoom out as we wrap up this conversation. You know, part of the major reason Sam and I wanted to chat with you all is not just to champion your project, especially for me as an Oakland resident, but to share with our listeners kind of what it takes to champion big things in their neighborhood. And so are there any kind of lessons learned or ideas that you want to share with folks who might be thinking about something just like this or similar big ideas in their community?
Yeah, I would say consistency is key. Like, when they talk about going to the gym, discipline beats out motivation every time, right? It is a daily thing for me to go on Instagram and send people happy birthday messages and send out newsletters and just keep up with people, and starting the ball rolling was one thing. Keeping the ball rolling is
absolutely
rolling the ball.
Yeah, it's a commitment, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's also just like bringing the community together as a force for good and getting people to connect, right? Like neighbors want to meet neighbors. And if they can meet each other through kind of this shared goal for the community, that's maybe the most beautiful way of connecting. And we've had so much like beauty in connecting with each other as neighbors and bringing the community together. I feel like we're such a tight-knit community. And not just because of this project, but really this project has been a catalyst for that neighborhood connection. And so using this, and it's not always just kind of sitting down and looking at agendas and taking minutes, looking at plans. Like, we're meeting over coffee, we're meeting over beers, we're getting pizza together, and we've really developed deep friendships as a result of this. So I think that's like a big piece of this too, is it's a fun activity and project for the neighborhood to get together around. And so we're sustaining that energy through community.
I love that. I mean, I think because it can be quite overwhelming when you think about the task you guys have ahead of you, and keeping up the discipline, working with all the various layers of government to get this thing done. But really, when it's fundamentally about community, getting together with purpose and doing something that may or may not happen in your lifetime, or may. The purpose is community, right? And I think that it's less overwhelming when you think about it in that way.
Planning with friends.
Planning with friends, that's right.
Planning with purpose.
Well, Sarah, Ben, thank you so much for joining us for a cup of coffee and to kind of help share your story about building even more in your community.
Thanks for all the work you do, Warren and Sam.
And thank you for what you guys do in the community.
We're excited to see how this goes in partnership with everybody else in our community. And thanks for, telling our story with us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Their San Antonio station is built in 5 years or 15 is almost beside the point. What stood out to us was seeing neighbors come together around a shared vision for their community. Projects like this don't just happen because one person has a great idea. They happen because enough people decide that their place is worth investing in. And that's a lesson that applies to every neighborhood. So with that, as always, here's our what now. A few simple things that you can do to get involved where you live. Step 1, start with curiosity. Pay attention. How do people move around your community? What are the gaps? Most cities, counties, transit agencies, and regional planning organizations already have transportation plans online. Search for your city's transportation plan, bicycle plan, transit plan, or general plan, and spend an afternoon exploring what's already being discussed. You might be surprised how many good ideas are already on paper. Step 2, find your people. Don't start with a campaign, start with a conversation. Invite a few neighbors, coworkers, parents, writers, or community members to talk together about what they're seeing and experiencing. Shared frustration can spark awareness, and shared passion can spark action, momentum. Choose a goal, build a plan, stay focused. Motivation comes and goes. Consistency changes communities. Step 4, invite expertise. As your group grows, bring in people who care about the same issue and understand the system. Planners, engineers, advocates, researchers, public officials. The strongest community organizations combine lived experience with technical expertise. You don't need to know everything yourself. And lastly, this one's for decision makers. Please listen to these people. For the elected officials, agency staff, and community leaders, open your ears and listen to these groups. Ask hard questions, push on assumptions, demand good analyses, but don't dismiss them. The people closest to the problem are often the people closest to the solution. And when communities become co-creators instead of spectators, better projects and better cities follow.